How's it going, everyone? It's Savi from SpongeBob. Today is September 12th, 2021, and today we're going to take a look at multiple tropical disturbances that are currently in the Atlantic at this time and have a chance of impacting land, such as Tropical Storm Nicholas, which could impact Texas, as well as another tropical disturbance that could maybe impact the East Coast. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather records. Make sure to like if you like this video. Make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather records. So to first begin this video, we're first going to take a look at Tropical Storm Nicholas, which has formed as of this morning, and then we'll talk about the other tropical disturbances, including the one that may come close to the East Coast a little bit later in the video. But here is Tropical Storm Nicholas right now, is currently in the Gulf, centered right over the Gulf of Mexico at this time, and based off of the water vapor imagery, you see that we're seeing a lot of convection within the center of circulation right now, where we're seeing a blow up of thunderstorm activity right now. And while it's only a 40-mile-per-hour tropical storm, or a low-end tropical storm, you see that it's fairly healthy for a low-end tropical storm, because we do have a lot of thunderstorm activity going on right now, and it's under a fairly moist environment where the relative humidities are very high in this region, and it's as a result of this upper level low that's bringing southerly moist flow in the lower levels of the atmosphere that's really moistening up the atmosphere in this area, and that's allowing for a lot of convection to occur, which is the reason why this looks fairly healthy for a low-end tropical storm, and it's expected to continue to slowly and gradually intensify under the very moist and very convective conditions that it currently is right now. However, the thing that is certainly inhibiting it is the strong wind shear right now, because as of right now, we have an upper level low that's centered towards Mexico, and it's bringing a strong strong winds from the southwest, which means that in the upper levels of the atmosphere, which is in excess, I'd say right around 20 knots, which is inhibiting the storm from allowing that heat energy to circulate around center circulation. So we're seeing a lot of the outflow move northward and the heat energy move northward as a result of it. However, the wind shear isn't so strong from this upper level low to a point where it'll weaken this storm or completely inhibit it from strengthening any further, because while there is a decent amount of wind shear right now, for one thing is that the wind shear isn't necessarily extremely strong. I'd say the wind shear is right around moderate at this time, only around 20 knots in the upper levels of the atmosphere. And another thing is that this upper level low is expected to weaken and move further westward away from this storm, which would mean that this storm would have an open opportunity to develop a little bit just before it comes close to Mexico or the Texas coast, which means that it does have a chance of developing into maybe a high-end tropical storm or a low-end category 1 hurricane. That's certainly not out of the possibility, but as of right now, I'd say the strengthening over the next several hours should be slow, because again, we're still experiencing wind shear, but it should gradually accelerate once this heads closer to the Texas coast. So we just have to wait and see how much this develops over the next several hours. Now, taking a look at the 5-day tropical weather outlook for the entire Atlantic, of course, there's Tropical Storm Nicholas with the central millibar pressure down to 1,008 millibars, moving northwest at around 15 miles per hour, which is around average speed for a tropical cyclone, and the maximum sustained winds are centered right around 40 miles per hour. We also have this disturbance, which has a 50% chance of developing within the next 5 days, so a moderate chance, and you see that it's fairly close to the East Coast, especially right around North Carolina. So this is something we need to watch. Another disturbance which has 60% chance of developing, and a low chance just off the coast of Portugal. So yeah, there's a lot to be watching, but we're gonna first talk about Tropical Storm Nicholas a little bit just before we move on to tropical disturbances. Now, taking a look at the current wind shear map for the entire Atlantic, and you see that where Nicholas is right now, you see that there is certainly strong wind shear imposed by this upper level low towards Mexico. However, like I said, that Mexican upper level low is expected to move further westward, and it's going to move out to a point where it'll be under a fairly the wind shear will be just light enough for this to gradually strengthen, and there could be wind shear just before landfall, but we just need to wait and see. Now, taking a look at what the computer models are saying, this is how the wind shear is looking like right now in the upper levels of the atmosphere. Of course, like I said, there's that upper level low I've been talking to you guys about, but as that upper level low moves further westward, you see that the wind shear becomes lighter. We begin to see the upper level high go more over the center of circulation, which would mean that it's going to be in an area where the wind shear will be just light enough. However, we still certainly can't rule out the fact, we can't certainly completely disregard the fact that there's a lot of wind shear just to the northwest of this storm, and that could certainly inhibit it if it comes close enough. It's going to be a fairly close forecast because you see that while currently the GFS model is expecting it to be under light wind shear, you see that only several miles to the northwest, the wind shear drastically increases as a result of this trough moving through the United States at this time and bringing strong southwesterly winds from in the upper levels of the atmosphere, which is going against what the lower level flow, the winds of the lower level flow, which is coming from the southeast, and that shift in the wind direction with height is what is wind shear. The fact that we're going to see a difference between wind direction with height means that there could be a strong enough wind shear. However, you see that the GFS model is more lenient on bringing light wind shear, but it's going to be a close forecast, I'd say. However, I'd say most likely we will see some sort of tropical storm very close to the Texas coast. So this is something you guys certainly need to pay close attention to, whether there's strong wind shear or not. However, what will certainly determine how strong this gets is how much wind shear it'll experience, because that'll be the primary key, because the moisture should be good for the most part, at least over the next several hours. However, you see that during the later life cycle of this storm, you see that because of the wind shear, we begin to see dry air entering the eastern side of this storm. So we need to just wait and see how the wind shear turns out, because if the wind shear is very light for the most part and the computer models didn't really detect the wind shear to be that light, we could see a Category 1 hurricane in our hands somewhere along coast Texas. However, if the wind shear ends up being stronger than expected and we see this trough that is over the Midwest come closer to the storm to really divert a lot of that heat energy away from the center circulation, then we're more likely to see a weak tropical storm, I'd say. Right now, it seems like both the computer models are leaning towards some sort of mid-level tropical storm. If we were to take a look at the European model, you see that the European model wants to take this further eastward, and it's still taking around a moderate tropical storm. Taking a look at the millibar pressure, you see that the European does bring it around up in the 1,000 millibars, but I'd say it should be a little bit stronger than this, because the European isn't as reliable when it comes to storms like this, and it seems like the more favorable outcome is that this moves further westward than what the European model is currently stating, which would mean that it would have more time over water to intensify over the warm Gulf of Mexico water. But in terms of track forecast, it really also all depends on the strength forecast, because taking a look again at the GFS model when it comes to the wind shear forecast, taking a look at that at the 200 millibar wind in the upper levels of the atmosphere, you see that if we were to continue to move forward, you see that the upper level winds sort of want to are pretty much coming from the west southwest, which would mean that if the storm was stronger, that would mean that the storm would have entirely more elevated circulation and higher cloud tops overall, which would mean that the upper level winds would affect the track of this storm more if this were stronger. And if we were to lean more towards a track where the upper level winds have more control over this storm, then we would see a track further eastward where it affects, I'd say, more of Houston and maybe as far east as western Louisiana. However, if the storm ends up being weaker by the time it reaches Mexico and Texas border, then we're more likely to see an eastward track where maybe it affects more Corpus Christi, because of course when there's a weaker storm and the cloud tops are a lot less elevated, which would mean that the upper level winds over Texas right now won't have as much of an effect on the storm's track. So it really all depends on the strength, and the strength depends on how much wind shear there is. So it's sort of like a chicken and the egg type scenario. So we just need to wait and see how this wind shear turns out to really determine the strength of the storm, which as a result will lead us to determine what track we're going to see. As of right now, it seems like the GFS, it seems like the computer models are leaning more towards a track further somewhere between the middle of Corpus Christi and Houston as of right now. However, they all agree that it's going to shift very far to the east towards Louisiana, which would mean that more rain could be centered towards Louisiana. So there's a lot to forecast. However, I will say that the Texas coast will likely experience a tropical storm, and whether this is a weak tropical storm, a strong tropical storm, or a hurricane, I'd prepare for just a tropical storm and just heavy rainfall, because even if this isn't even a tropical storm, heavy rainfall should be expected along Texas coast that could be in excess of 20 inches. So do not underestimate this storm just because it might not reach maybe as strong as you anticipated. And in terms of my current forecast, I'm forecasting this to become a high-end tropical storm by Tuesday morning, right around 70 miles per hour. I do think that it's going to have enough time over water, and the wind shear will be just light enough to at least allow for some gradual strengthening. So I'd prepare for a low-end hurricane if I were you guys in Texas, even if this doesn't become a hurricane, because it's better to be safe than sorry. So make sure to prepare around Texas for heavy rain and other things that you typically see during tropical storms, such as gusty winds and potentially large storm surge. Now, taking a look at the National Hurricane Center's forecasted track, you see that the National Hurricane Center is bringing this pretty much hugging the southern Texas coast, pretty much hugging Corpus Christi, and eventually does turn it a little bit further westward, along with the stronger wind, along with this trough moving through the Midwest United States. This could affect areas further eastward, where we could see Louisiana get involved in a lot of rain as well, which would be unfortunate because, of course, you guys experienced just a lot of heavy rainfall from Hurricane Ida, and to add more rain on top of that would definitely not add insult to injury to those areas. So even as far east as Louisiana and even Mississippi need to at least be aware of this, because you could experience heavy rain from this, especially with the upper level winds wanting to steer a lot of the moisture further eastward. So make sure to pay close attention to your local forecast right around those areas. And in terms of the rainfall that I was talking to you guys about, and this is just a lot of rain and could easily cause flooding, and especially in an area vulnerable like Houston, which could experience, right now the forecast is around 6 to 10 inches of rain, but you guys are not at all far from the 10 to 15 inch category, and we're even seeing some areas go up and over 15 to 20 inches of rain, which certainly will cause flooding. Flash flooding is likely in those areas, and you see that this rain extends further eastward into Lake Charles, where you guys could experience 6 to 10 inches, and New Orleans is just outside the 4 to 6 inch category. So you guys all throughout the southeast, make sure to keep in mind of flooding, and if you see a body of water, turn around, don't drown, because typically the body of water is a lot deeper than what you think most of the time. So make sure to stay prepared for flooding. If your home is prone to flooding, you got to prepare with potentially putting sandbags in your house, and make sure to stay prepared for in case of a flood event. Even if your area typically doesn't experience flooding in the Houston area, this may be the one time you do experience flooding, because this is just a very heavy amount of rainfall, around 15-20 inches of rain. Now, taking a look at the storm surge forecast, while this may only be a tropical storm at landfall, storm surge could still be a threat all throughout the Texas coast. Especially since you guys are very low lying and very vulnerable to storm surge. You see that an area of 2 to 4 feet of storm surge extends from the Texas-Mexico border as far north as Galveston Bay, where 2 to 4 feet of storm surge is expected. And remember, it only takes 2 feet of water to completely move a car, so you don't want to underestimate 2 to 4 feet of storm surge, especially if you live along the coast. So make sure to pay close attention to that and keep that in mind all throughout the Texas coast. Now, taking a look at what else is in the Atlantic currently, we also are taking a look at the next tropical disturbance, which could move northward and potentially impact the East Coast later in the future. So you see that this disturbance right now, it's fairly disorganized, I'd say. Currently, this disturbance is over relatively strong wind shear at this time, so at least in the near future, for the next 48 hours, this shouldn't have any chance of developing. However, as this moves further northward, it's going to be in an area where the wind shear will weaken just slight enough to a point where we could see our next tropical storm, which would become Tropical Storm Odette if this were to form just off the East Coast. Now, take a look at the chance of National Hurricane Center is giving it. It's around a 50% chance over the next 5 days, so it certainly is possible we could see our next tropical storm just off the East Coast. Now, taking a look at what the GFS model is saying when it comes to this storm, let's actually take a look at the precipitation map to see which areas in the East Coast could get impacted by rainfall from this storm. If we were to continue to move forward, you see that the GFS model wants to develop this storm, and it's relatively light. It's a relatively weak storm at this point, so it isn't a major worry and should deal with moderate wind shear as it heads towards North Carolina. But you see it does come close to North Carolina, and we do have a little bit of a blocking ridge that's going to be towards the north of it. So if this ridge were to move any slower or be a little bit bigger, then we could see this come fairly close to the East Coast. However, the good news is that currently the GFS model is leaning more towards taking this tropical storm out to sea, which wouldn't affect the greater Northeast region, and that certainly would be good news because you guys already experienced quite a bit when it comes to tropical cyclones this summer, I'd say, because you of course experienced Tropical Storm Henri, which brought a lot of heavy rain, Tropical Storm Ida, which was devastating and deadly, especially for New York and New Jersey, and we also saw the remnants of Tropical Storm Elsa bring heavy rain and flooding throughout the Northeast. So in terms of tropical cyclones, you guys in the Northeast experienced a lot, so you certainly don't want to experience another one. However, the good news is that the GFS model wants to take this out to sea, but there's still a lot of uncertainty because I'm going beyond the 120-hour mark. I think there's still the possibility that maybe this ridge lingers a little bit more around the East Coast, and this could bring this storm closer to the East Coast. There's still a lot of uncertainty. The European and GFS both want to take this out to sea, which certainly we hope that is this scenario. However, I think there's still a lot of days where the computer models could iron themselves out, and we could see maybe a shift further eastward. The most likely scenario at this point, I'll say, is that still this maybe impacts North Carolina with some rain and potentially as a tropical storm and then moves out to sea. But we can't rule out every possibility just yet, especially when we're forecasting this beyond the 5-day mark. Now, take a look at the wind shear. You're going to see that that as of right now, where the disturbance is, there's strong wind shear. It's sort of embedded in an upper level low, the surface low. However, if we move forward, the wind shear will weaken, and we're going to see this upper level low weaken as well, and we're going to see this lower level low develop in an area where it's just small enough to the wind shear where it's light is just small enough to promote development. So we could see development just off the Carolinas and could potentially impact Carolinas headed into late next week. So certainly you guys in the Carolinas, or at least the East Coast in general, just be aware of this, because potentially this could become our next tropical storm that could come close to you guys. In terms of anything else that we're keeping track of in the Atlantic, we do have another tropical disturbance, like I said, that that could develop into our next tropical storm as well, potentially Odette, depending on which develops first, this one or this one. However, the GFS model is leaning towards bringing this northward, which wouldn't impact anyone, which is good news, but there's still a lot of uncertainty regarding the exact future of these tropical disturbances. We're not sure if this will be a threat to Leeward Islands or any sort of land, because beyond the 5-day mark, it becomes tricky to forecast. So I'll make sure to keep you guys updated on that as we get closer and closer and more confident with the forecast on whether this will impact land or not in the future. However, it is more likely than not to develop into our next tropical cyclone, as the National Hurricane Center is giving us 60% chance of developing. So there's still so we certainly at least need to be aware of this, but as of right now, it shouldn't be in any imminent threat to land, at least in the near future. But yeah, guys, I guess that's it for this video. I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content. Make sure to like if you like this video. Make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather content. I hope you guys have a good